talk a little about improving performance by conducting a great half-year review. Now, let's see if I can do this. What are we trying to accomplish today? Let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish today. And not just today, but what are we trying to accomplish with our businesses? The real goal, and the goal of Growth Strategy Partners, and the goal for you is to improve your performance, improve the performance of your business. And one of the ways we can do that is by conducting reviews on our business. In particular, it's halfway through the year. Let's do a review on our business and see what do we need to do to make it better, for the rest of this year, next few months, if not the next few years. And what do we do typically? Now, the economy is very tough. It's very challenging business conditions. And although we may start with some plans for the year, what I described here in this chart as at point A, trying to get to point B, whether it be B for this year, the next few years, that's what we'd like to do. And then what happens is the year comes along, and what actually happens is we may be above or below our expected performance, if it's even defined or documented. So the question is, what do you do along the way? If you're looking at this first milestone, year one, period one, and you below what you're expected to be, what do? Would you make some changes as you get to point two? Okay, would you be making changes? What type of change? Hey, we're ahead of things. This is good. Okay, the questions that we're going to be looking at today is how do you do a great review to improve your performance? Now, connected with the fact that it's a much tougher business environment, it really requires companies to be more sophisticated and have much better management techniques in terms of reviewing their performance and identifying how to get better. And that's what we're going to share with you today, is how to do that. So we're going to share a couple things. We're going to share with you, first of all, what do you compare to? I've got just a slide here showing a plan. We're going to share with you maybe 7 reasons of what you need to be looking for when you make these changes. We're also going to give you a little checklist at the end to help you identify how well you're running your own reviews. Okay? So that's what I want to keep in mind today as we go through this presentation. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to make our businesses better. One of the tools and techniques we're going to talk through is the 6-month review. Now, let me give you a little introduction to who's on the phone with me today. You see myself, left, Christopher Stenz. I'm the managing partner of Growth Strategy Partners and the founder. Now, what we do and what I do on a regular basis is, I build a lot of strategic plans and help organizations set their goals, set their forecasts for the future. Because of that, I probably conduct 2 to 5 strategy reviews every month. Okay, so I'm doing a lot of these, and been doing this for probably the last 15 years. Because of that, I've got a lot of learning combined with what Nancy and Richard have done and some research Growth Strategy Partners has done to identify how do you conduct a great review. Okay, now the benefit that my clients like, the reason why they ask us to come in, is we can create better reviews. We actually get better results, and we get faster results. And by doing that, they benefit. They have a better business. So that's a little about me. I'm going to pass off to Nancy and then Richard. Nancy, you there?
Sure am. Hi, everybody. Welcome, and it's really great to see so many familiar names on the attendee list. So we're really glad to have you today. Like Chris, I do an awful lot of strategic planning, and one of the biggest challenges my clients have is the execution of their plans. And so we find these monthly reviews that Chris was talking about seems to be one of the most critical elements in attaining the goals that the company has, as well as ensuring that the strategies are on track. So we find this a really valuable tool. Richard, do you want to share some of your thoughts?
Sure. This is Richard Zahn. Glad to be part of the discussion today. And I became interested in this concept of reviewing the plan actually first when I was president of an entrepreneurial company. And our board hired an outside consultant to come in and help us build a strategic plan, which is something that I do a lot of myself now. And in my initial meeting with this advisor, one of the first things he said to me was that he was glad to come and facilitate building the plan, but I needed to understand that once that process was completed, that he would meet with me and my senior management at several points during the year to review our progress on the plan. And I became convinced through that experience of the importance of the review, and two major things jumped out. One, it kept our team accountable to each other and to the plan for doing the things we said were important to do. And secondly, it made it a living document. It was something that was not, which you always hear, created and put on a shelf. It was modified and tweaked as we went through the year. So from that point forward, both when I was running companies and now as an advisor to companies, I'm committed to the process of regular reviews of the plan.
And I know you'll pick up when Nancy's talking a lot, quite easily, and Richard you'll know because he's the one with the weird accent compared to what I have here in Boston. Thanks, Richard. Let me tell you, the audience, a little bit about Growth Strategy Partners. Give a little background. And many of actually the people Nancy said are on the line here are either very familiar with us through being clients or prospects of Growth Strategy Partners. We call ourselves what I call a research-based consulting firm, and we help entrepreneurially minded organizations, those that want to run a very entrepreneurial business compared to the Fortune 500. So it's more of this private, small, mid-size, upper mid-size, that want to grow their revenues, their profits, and their talent faster and more efficiently. Now, we can do that because we've conducted extensive research to identify how do you grow a company? How do you make something successful in the long term? Through that research, we've identified what we call the 7 keys to growth that you'll see down below that get into planning, okay, of which the review process is a piece of this. So we've done research to identify how do you grow. We've built some tools, some methodologies to help implement these keys faster. And as you heard from both Nancy and Richard, and our other consultants, they've been presidents, CEOs, and owners themselves. Been there, done that. And you pull that all together, and what that does, it allows us to help you grow your business faster and more efficiently. And a little background on Growth Strategy Partners. Let's talk about today. The themes for today, very focused on themes. These are the things that are going to be repeated throughout today's presentation. The first is this. When we talk about reviewing progress, it's all based on the assumptions that you have made, your team has made, relative to the business and what has driven the goals, the strategies, and then more importantly, the expectations. What did you assume was going to happen this year, this week, this month, this year, the next few years? That drives so much of what we do in the goal setting and the review process. So that's one of the big key themes for today. The second thing is, when you do a review, you need to understand why you are or you're not achieving your goals. Okay? We will talk about many organizations that we see and we work with. They understand, oh, it's a variance to this or a variance to that, but they don't understand why. And it's critically important to understand why. Sometimes you hear the word root cause. Another theme today is you need to understand why you are or not achieving your goal. And then the third theme for today is, without disciplined action, your performance will be a challenge. So without being disciplined, we'll talk about discipline of the planning process, but more importantly, the discipline of conducting the reviews and doing follow-up. If you're not disciplined in the organization, it's going to be very difficult to be as successful as you could be. Okay? So those are the 3 themes for today. Now, the first thing we're going to do is, we're going to start off with a quick poll. And I'm going to ask you a question about the robustness of your strategy review process. So what you should see on your screen now is a poll that says, how robust is your strategy or half-year review process? What I'd like you to do is just to pick one of them, close this choice. And when we talk about robust, we're talking about we've got regular meetings, we've got quantified goals, we review those goals. Somewhat would say, we've got irregular, infrequent meetings, but I still got the quantitative piece, weak, okay, irregular meetings with really undefined goals, and, poor right at the bottom, we kind of wing it, okay? So that's what I'd like to ask you to do, and we're going to look at that in about 10 or 15 seconds. I'm giving a little insight here on what the results are, and really this is going to help us have an understanding of where is the audience in terms of robustness and performance relative to their planning process. So let's get almost everybody done here. In fact, I'm going to write down what I see as some answers. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this with you right now. So I'm going to close the poll, and I am going to share it with you. And here's what you should see. So you should see that. Change this again here. You seeing the poll there, Nancy?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's kind of
Okay.
interesting that 44% of the people who responded said they were, somewhat likely to have, they might have some irregular meetings, so maybe not quite as scheduled, but they do have quantitative goals, and that's really good to hear. I would have to say that a lot of the companies I start working with don't have those in the beginning, but of course by the end they have a lot more, a lot better scheduled meetings, and they've got those quantitative goals. So those are critically important.
I see almost like that little bell curve. 13% doing very good, 13% doing very poorly. That's both good and bad answers, but there's a good percentage that have it under control and a good percentage that don't. And then you get that middle, 44% somewhat and 31% weak. Interesting. That I would probably say, Nancy, somewhat, and Richard, somewhat reflects our client base before we start working with them, right? As you inferred earlier.
And I think the irregularity is a common theme that I deal with. Well, we get around to it every now and then.
Yeah.
But it's not a disciplined part of the planning process and the management of the company.
And we're actually going to talk about that later. Actually, not too much later. In fact, we're going to talk about it now, which is the discipline that organizations need to be successful. That's actually the last theme here. And that's what we're going to talk about now, which is discipline. So,
Chris, it strikes me though, for some folks who don't have a regular, due date for when they close the books, it's hard for them to get the data. But if you have a goal of, the second week of the month or something, you have the results from the previous month, then you have a schedule that you can work with, and that may enable you to be more regular about when you have those meetings.
yeah, well, when we talk about discipline and having a disciplined, establishing disciplined action, there's, we have two pieces of it. There's the action to actually conduct the process, the planning process itself, right? And as you inferred, some organizations don't necessarily close their books either on a regular basis or early enough. We actually have one of our clients, Nancy, we're both working on, doesn't close their books till like the third week of the month. And so we're into the fourth week before even reviewing the previous month's results. Now, although that's not a good timing to review, because we're 30 or 20-something days behind, we do still have regular reviewed processes. They would fit into the top 13% because they have a regular process and they have data, right? So we talk about being disciplined. What we need to emphasize, I think, to people listening in is there's a discipline of the process itself, whether you have it scheduled to the first of the month, second week, third week, or 2 months later. At least there's a process in place that they're doing on a recurring basis. There's a process of making decisions, the discipline of actually making a decision. We'll talk a little later about, I'm sure there's a lot of times you go into meetings and you conduct a meeting and you leave the meeting and you go, well, did we decide anything? We talked about a lot of things, but did we decide anything? So what's that discipline of making decisions? And then, most importantly, follow through. If you decided that whether it be a strategic change or a tactical change or even something small, is there follow through? This is usually, to me, Nancy, Lisa, and Richard, we've seen many organizations aren't disciplined on that. And Richard, you kind of hit upon it, which gets into the second big bullet here, is who's going to establish that discipline. It's usually driven, obviously, by the owner, the president, the entrepreneur. And I would say a good half of most organizations have this president, owner, who's an entrepreneur, and they're characteristically right-brain creative people. And they're not, it's not that they're not disciplined, but they don't like repetition, and especially when it comes to monthly reviews. So, Rich, I don't know if that's what you were inferring earlier, where a lot of that challenge is coming actually from the top.
Right, and I found in my work with companies, oftentimes a role that I can play as an advisor is to bring that discipline and accountability, and to raise my hand every now and then and say, hey, we need to sit down and talk about this.
Well, I think that's the point we should share with people listening today. Who is going to establish that discipline? Either you, the president, or head of a department, is going to establish that discipline. You're going to have a regularly scheduled meeting. It's going to be prepared, and we're going to go through, how to do that. Now, what we've also shown here is that if you're not going to do it, you can't abdicate that responsibility. It's part of running the business, so somebody needs to do it. Now, what we've identified here, what we call an operations leader, usually in the operations role, you have people that are more left-brain logical. I fit in that category. I'm what I call a genetically coded engineer. Besides having the degree, that's how I think. That's how, I think a lot of the consultants, at least with Growth Strategy Partners, thinks that way. Nancy notwithstanding, and it helps us with our clients keep them focused. But the point here is, to those listening, if you are not the person to be disciplined in conducting regular structured meetings, then you need to find somebody that can. Either someone in your business, typically on the operations side, could be on the finance side, or as Richard said, they bring us in because there's no one in-house to do it, and that's a great role for an outside, third-party person.
Chris, what I would add is that, and you made this point, but I want to be clear on it, the role of the leader is to commit to the importance of the discipline. They can, but somebody else can actually drive the process of discipline. But what the leader can, if the leader is not committed to the process, then the process will die.
Well, go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, and I think one of the characteristics of the person who's going to be most successful at the discipline of this is their ability to ask those tough questions. In some cases, it may be political types of questions where you really need to understand the culture and the politics of what's going on within a company. But that person's got to have the intestinal fortitude to be able to ask those tough questions and push to get the complete answers.
Exactly. So the first point in one of our themes today is the discipline of the process and the discipline of the person who would be leading this. So one thing for listeners to think about is, do you have that fortitude, left brain or even right brain, but with some focus to do this? Or do you really need to find someone to do it, okay, whether it be internal or external? But that's really the starting. That's why we start with the disciplined action is you can put all the goals and budgets and plans and all that together, but if it's not going to be done on a regular basis, then really questions what's the value of that. So that's kind of the first point of today. Second thing we're going to hit upon from our themes is the assumptions. So this is, again, another big theme today, and also probably, one of the most important pieces of, I'll even say running a business. Because when you talk about assumptions, this is what's driving our thinking. And it really gets to the question, well, why would you think you could achieve a goal? if you set a goal out there, when you think about setting a goal, and we do this actually on a daily basis, we make some assumptions, whether it be, how long it's going to take to get to the office in the morning based on what day of the week it is or what time I'm leaving, and therefore what the traffic's going to be. So you take what we call historical performance into play to define this goal. And then the second piece of it is projections into the future. These are the assumptions. So we talk about goal setting, because we're going to talk about reviewing our goals and improving performance. It's the assumptions that we set or need to set that are going to drive those goals. When you think about what we're doing, the goal isn't to review the goals. The goal is to review the assumptions about the goals. And this is what's imperative when we start doing reviews. And this is probably, at least I know, one of my big learnings as we've been doing strategy and executive coaching and strategy review sessions, is the goal setting is all based on the assumptions that we make. And if we, as a leadership team, don't challenge each other of these assumptions, then the goals are going to be set incorrectly. And then we're going to go out and say we didn't get the goals, and then we're going to say, man, that was a dumb goal. And it's really not a dumb goal, it was a dumb assumption. Okay? So another big theme for today is the assumptions that we make. How well, first of all, I guess the question to you is, are you putting your assumptions, are you defining your assumptions, are you documenting your assumptions before you start setting goals? Okay? And then the second piece of it is, are you actually reviewing the assumptions? You're just looking at the goals and saying, hey, we're on or off. So that's another key critical point today. And what I'm going to show you here is some assumptions that are actually going to link into a example we're going to show today on a review. So this is actually a real-life client, and they made some assumptions that the market demand is going to be flat, if not going down. They're going to have price pressures. Okay? There's going to be a significant number of customers, though, who want customized product compared to standard product. They've got enough products in the pipeline to launch 6 of them this year. Every new customer would want some higher value and therefore higher margin products, and it will be easy to establish some internet sales. These are all assumptions that this client actually, there's a lot more behind this, but these are some of the assumptions the client has made. And if you look at this, if you looked at, price pressures as an assumption, you can therefore think what goals or strategies might an organization make because of that assumption. If they assume it's easy to create an internet sales, geez, you can obviously see where the internet sales is going to come from. But too often, organizations end up with, hey, we need to set a goal of selling on the internet. That's the thing these days. And the question is, well, why? What's the assumptions you have behind that? So that's another big theme for today, is talking about assumptions, defining your assumption. We're going to talk about that a little later. As you do your assumptions, and we talk about the assumptions driving the goals, what this does is the goals now get cascaded throughout the business, because we're getting to reviewing performance, which gets into kind of action items. So you've got these goals. The assumptions drive the goals drive the strategies drive the actions that you're going to work on, and then those actions are being worked on by resources. And when you look at the big picture of what you're doing in your business, you've got resources, and you're trying to focus them in certain areas, certain actions, certain strategies, certain goals to build a better business. Behind all this is these key performance indicators or metrics. So that's the kind of the rollout of the goal setting. We'll show you now a little later, how this works. Let's jump now into specifically the review, conducting a review, and what are we trying to accomplish. We just talked about, first of all, it's important to be disciplined, have disciplined action, and the second thing is to define, document your assumptions. Now, let's talk about the review and what we're trying to do. Remember, again, at the beginning of the slide, we talked about the big picture of improving performance. We're trying to figure out, are we getting any better? Is our performance getting better? In the reviews, we're also trying to understand how accurate were our assumptions. Usually it's not a right or wrong, but how accurate were they? Why are some of our strategies working, and why are some aren't, and specifically, what corrective actions should we take? So this is what we're trying to accomplish in the review. And I think it might be good to note now, if you think about meetings that companies have, there's different types of meetings. Some meetings are geared towards communication, where you're going to communicate things out to your employees about what's going on. You may have a meeting where you're looking to get input. You bring in your team, the whole company, and ask for some input. Then there's meetings that are where decisions are going to be made. That's what we're talking about today, decision-making meetings. What corrective actions are we going to take? So let's keep that in mind as we go forward, as we do the meeting. It's not about where are we, what did we do, what's the next step, but what are we going to do about it? Now, before we do one more thing, before we get into the meeting itself and the review, the question is, what are you comparing to? So you may have set some assumptions, you set some goals. What do you compare that to? So there's a what piece of it. Do you compare it to how you did last month? Do you compare it to the same month last year? Do you compare it to a plan? Okay. Now, I put here last month, and then you'll see here last period. Some of our clients get a little more advanced, and they don't look at 12 periods or 12 months. They look at 13. So do you compare a month with 5 weeks to a month with 4 weeks and go, geez, we did better? Is that a relative comparison? So some organizations start looking at periods. They look at the forecast, the goal forecast. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the what. And then, how do you look at that? Do you compare the dollars? Do you whether it be sales dollars or gross margin dollars? Do you look at now percent? This is a discussion I probably have with every client. Do we look at the gross margin dollars, or do we look at the gross margin percent? Well, we could sell more at a lower price and get greater sales, but lower gross margin dollars. Excuse me, more gross margin dollars, but a lower percent. Which is better? What about the units, or the volume that you're doing? And then you start looking at this whole cumulative component. So I may have been off a month or two, but if you add up over 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months, cumulatively, I'm doing well. And here's, although we've asked the question, here's the answer. First of all, you're not going to like it, but it depends on your business. It depends on the business cycle. But more often than not, we're trying to get organizations to put a budget, a plan, a forecast, whatever term you want to put towards it, and measure to that, because that is where your assumptions have been captured. So you can look at what you did last year, but is that relative? In fact, if you, I'm assuming that if you were doing a review and you realized that you were up 12% this year, this month, this quarter, you'd be probably fairly happy, at least in the way the economy's been going. Now, if I told you that the industry was up 18%, would you still be happy? And that's just an industry comparison. Not getting into what do you think you should have been doing, but now it's a comparison to industry. So you've got all these factors that you need to think about. Usually not one gives you the direct answer. We do recommend you look at a plan, budget, forecast, and then look at a similar period, whether it be 12 months, 4.5 weeks or 4 weeks as a comparison. Anything, Richard, Nancy, you want to add on this?
Well, I think, it really does depend on the type of industry you're in. A lot of retailers, for example, will look at their current month this year versus last year, kind of as a sense of, because they have so much seasonality in their business, they really need to take that into account. And it would be much more difficult if they just took their plan or their budget and they divided it by, let's say, 52 weeks or 12 months, because the seasonality would not necessarily be reflected. I would argue, of course, that they should be putting seasonality into those plans and budgets. That way, they can really tally it out more accurately and reflect what's really happening in their business. And so many businesses today do have that seasonality issue to deal with.
And I'd even ask the question, Nancy, to those listening, what are you comparing to? Do you
Yep.
have the data that you're tracking on a live actual basis?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you comparing to? If you, a lot of the the small business owners have Peachtree or Quicken or some type of financial program like that, and that usually is built in a previous last month or same period last month, last year, whatever, as a comparison. So I've seen that as a default, and it's a good start, but is that relative, right? I mean, again, even though it might be the same month, if the summer is slow, June, July, August, was it same slow last year? Did something happen that may have decreased sales or increased cost? So it's a good start, but I guess the question to those listening is, what are you even measuring something? Okay, and that's a necessary piece to understand if you're getting better or not.
Well, I think so, and also it's the why. Why is it different? Why is it better? Why is it worse? And I think that leads right into where you're going next, right?
Hey, right on, Nancy. Why? So let's say that you were looking at performance of June, and we have some comparison to either June of last year, we're looking at March, April, May of this year, whatever it might be, and we now have that comparison. The real question, and one of the themes that was brought up today, is why is there a change? If that change is up or down, why did it happen? And what you'll see here is a list of some of the reasons why. So we start with activity level. So let's say, we'll take the sales numbers because it's an easy thing for everyone to understand. If sales are up, if they're ahead of last period, last month, last year, whatever it might be, why is that? Well, is it because we now have 5 people doing sales and we had 3 or 4 or something less last month or the month before? The activity level or resource level has gone up. Okay? Then you can start looking at demand. So maybe sales are up. Is it because volume's up, demand's up? Is sales up, volume hasn't increased, but the price has gone up? How do you grow a business? You raise your prices, which is very easy to do these days, right? But how much has price impacted performance? So let's say sales are flat, and volume is the same. Okay, does that mean your prices are the same? Well, let's say volume's going up, but sales are the same. Is that because your prices have gone down? If your margins are eroding, is that because your costs have gone up? There's a whole component of the product mix. The volume's been the same, but the mix has changed. We're selling more of our higher margin products. Therefore, our profits have gone up. Have we done some different allocation of resources? Or do we have some skills? Maybe back on the sales side, we're not selling as well as we expected. We still got the same number of resources, but maybe the skills aren't there. And the assumption was our skills are going to get better. This goes back to where the assumptions are. We're going to give some training. We see it a lot with our clients where, well, how are you going to increase sales without adding more resources? We're going to teach them to do a better job, which is easier said than done. Okay? That's the assumptions that we're making. Is there some regulatory changes that may have impacted sales? If you were in the firearms industry, when Obama took office, last few years you've been doing quite well. And it wasn't necessarily just regulatory, but it was the fear of it. People buying weapons, and the economy kind of added to that. Product mix, oh yeah, the luck piece. Well, that doesn't exist. Okay? So the question here is, why was there a change? And this is another key theme for today. Why was there a change? And if you don't understand if it's a volume, price, cost, or activity level, then you can't really make a good decision because you really don't know why. It's that root cause piece.
And Chris, to that point, this is Richard, it's important that, the rule of the old 5 whys. I mean, you got to keep drilling down to that root cause. And one of the best examples of this occurred with a client of mine couple years ago, and we built a plan for the year that was had a significant increase in revenue in it. It was driven largely by introduction of a new product. The product was ready. We'd had it at trade shows. We'd gotten good feedback, and we went to market, and we had great expectations. As we got into the review later in the year, the unit numbers, we just weren't moving enough units. We assumed the why was a pricing issue, so we adjusted the price. We came back and looked at it in another review. Unit volume was still not where we thought it was. The price change had not. And as we began to ask why, we had fundamentally missed the mark on the value proposition as viewed by the consumer of our product, which led to a whole series of changes in the plan. So it's not a simple one-time why. I think you've got to continue to ask yourself and drill down to the real root cause of it.
Well, Richard, in that example, I'm gonna bring up the assumptions though. Did you have market data that said that they were going to buy this type of product, which again may be difficult to do, and or were there assumptions made that you had enough indications and you assumed even more from that? So was it assumptions that were wrong on this one compared to the product or something else, the value proposition you brought up?
We had limited market data going in, and that's a whole other issue. And we built our plan on that limited feedback. But when we got into the broader market, you know, we had made some assumptions about who the market was and the value that they would get. So it was clearly, you know, building some assumptions on limited facts. And that caused us to drill deeper down into the market research side of it and really refine the target market and the niche, and that led to a whole series of changes, including pricing, et cetera.
So it's kind of, you did the review and that's the outcome.
Yeah.
Let's go through now and talk about, you know, actually conducting a specific review. So we've talked about, you know, you have to understand why. You need to have something to compare to. We've talked about the assumptions that go into it, and we've talked about the discipline. So now let's talk about actually the review itself. So we're going to have a meeting. Let's think about it. We're going to have a review, but we're going to have a meeting. Like any meeting, we should prepare for that meeting. And so envision at this point in time that there are X number of goals that the organization has set. Those goals have strategies. Those goals have action items. There's actual numbers that are supposed to be targeted, and there's a person responsible for each of those action items and strategies and goals. That owner is what they're going to do now is they're going to go out and they're going to provide a summary, okay, to the team members 1 week before the meeting to advise them where he or she stands on this goal. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, what was my goal for that period? If we're doing a 6-month review, we might not just look at June, but we may look at January through June. What were the assumptions that were made about where that goal came from and what should be done? How did we perform? Again, don't forget about the pricing and volume impacts. Are we ahead of schedule, on schedule, or behind schedule? Now, we've used a combination of ahead, on, and behind, or an ABCD rank rating, okay, where the owner would rate themselves, how well are they doing, and then what are they going to recommend going forward. And I'm going to show you a sample of this in a second, but the purpose here is for the owner to get to his or her team the progress a week in advance so that we don't show up at a meeting and spend an hour or 3 just looking at or reviewing and understanding status. So this is the homework to have a good meeting. We don't need to sit around and listen to the same person or anybody say, well, my goal was this, and you know, here's where I'm at. That's like a status meeting. Let's get that done in advance, and then get to the meeting and use that time with key people in the organization making decisions. So you get the summary. There's a purpose of focusing on numbers not just subjective information. I love it when you ask someone how they're doing. I'm doing great, and what's that based on? Well, got a lot of activity out there, and there's no numbers to support it. The other important piece of this is to deal with any issues before the meeting. And what I have here is individual issues, meaning if one team member may have an issue or disagreement with what the other one is doing, and it might be more of an individual concern rather than a company or team concern. If I was a team member and I received this summary a week in advance and I had an issue, I could call up that person or go see that person and say, I don't get this. I don't understand this. Help me understand this. And then we don't have 4, 5, 8, 10 people waiting around while that one person gets up to date or understands what's going on. So it's dealt with before the meeting. That's the purpose of this preparation. Now, the first thing, let's say if I was providing an update on a goal that I was doing, first thing I'm going to look at is the data. This is some data from a goal, and the goal was to sell sell a certain percentage of high margin products. This is a client, and the client had 4 products that constituted this high margin product category, 4 items. And what you'll see here is the pounds that they've sold on a month-to-month basis of these higher margin products. And you'll see this line here, the lighter line, which is the percentage of those products as it relates to the total pounds sold. Company selling pounds of product. Now, you'll see that it's been growing in the first few months, but then it's flattened out in the last 3. So if I'm looking at this, or even you're looking at this, you can see some trending. If you even add now this top line, the darker dashed line, this is what the plan was. This is the budget. This is what the goal we assumed was to achieve. So anyone now looking at data in the charting, the fact that charting is helpful because you can see trending, you could probably say a couple things off the bat. At least I know I could. A, I may be getting better in the first quarter, but it's flat in the second quarter. Okay, and oh, by the way, I'm definitely not on what my plan was. Now, percentage-wise off, we'll get into it. So the first thing you do when you have a review is you need to look at the data. That is the black and white answer. Then what we recommend, and what I would do if I was the owner, is I'm going to go write up that summary. This is a sample of what that summary looks like. So if the objective here was to sell 720,000 pounds of this item by June, and this is the total amount, and really half of that is what the milestone was, and we're going to measure it by both sales dollars and pounds. Well, my target was 720, my actual 614. So right now we have some quantitative answers as to how well we're performing. Now the question is why. You'll see that there's this track being accomplished or not. We've got a box on here being a little behind. Now the volume is down 15% overall, so you could argue that this is a little more than a little behind. It's probably closer to not on track. Okay. Now here's the point about assumptions. We talk about how important this is. Well, were the assumptions valid as to where we'd achieve that 614-pound goal? Well, excuse me, 720,000 pound goal. No. And the reason was one of the buyers of this product, they used this product in one of their products, they actually shut down this piece of their plant for 3 months. Whoops. We assumed this company would be buying the same amount on a regular basis month to month. So the assumption that we made about where the 720,000 pounds would be was off because we didn't know part of this, one of our customers didn't buy it in those 3 months. Oh, by the way, they're also thinking about dropping the product for some different reasons. Now, we've also learned that the market prices were lower by 12% than we expected. Now, again, one of the strategies was for this client was to sell higher margin product to offset some of the lower margin and just commodity product. But what's happened, as you saw in the assumptions earlier, is that the pricing was being challenged. Well, it actually has 12% lower than we had even thought it was going to be. And therefore, our prices have been lower. So the assumptions we made were off. Now, this person here suggested, what are we going to do to improve this performance? Well, we need to add some more customers to offset that loss, or we can consider reducing the prices so we can at least get the volume through. This is back to that, is a margin percent or margin dollar better? They recommended what some of the budget changes would be, and then they put in some milestones. And they basically saying the milestones are not going to be met because of these 3-month period. Now, there's a little more length to this one. I shortened it for the presentation, but the point is, we can now get this out to our team members, and they can look at it and see, well, geez, what do we do? Now, another thing we can look at that helps us understand progress is what we call a milestone calendar, which includes a stoplight chart. And I'm going to do real quickly through this, where you'll see the 4 items here that make up this high margin. And let's just look at item number 1, and you'll see 2 lines. One line is because these are the pounds that were going to be sold to the existing customers, and these are the pounds that were going to be sold to new customers. New customer number 2, okay? So, and what you'll see is the first number is what the pounds per month was going to be, and the second number is what the actual, planned versus actual. And you can see they sold 22,000 versus 20,000, so that becomes green, yellow, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that the existing customer sales is on track. It's the new customer sales where we're having troubles. And by looking at this charting now, we can now see progress. In fact, you can look here in February, we were going, this is red, this is yellow, what's going to happen in March? It did turn around on the existing customer, so we can keep that strategy or action item going. We made some changes on the new customer because you can see it's been red all along. In fact, we actually changed that strategy. So as you go through your review and you look at a combination of what was the assumptions made and what's progress, you look quantitatively to see what they're doing. Now the question is, what do you do? This is the crux of the review. Now, the first thing is, again, back to why. You need to understand why the goal wasn't achieved. Was it because of volume? Was it because of pricing, costs? What was the reasoning? What are the assumptions you have about the future? And then what do you do? Do you continue as planned? Do you add some more resources? How about taking some resources off it? What about you changing the approach or just stop that whole action completely? This is the crux of the review process. Now, what you'll see here with, and an example we'll use with this high margin product sale, the products were still successful. They were still high margin. They were still better than some of the other commodity products that the client had. Volume was down mostly because of one customer in particular not working those 3 months, with a little impact, the volume, with pricing driving a little of the volume down. Pricing dropping, and we didn't want to drop, the client didn't want to drop their prices as much. That impacted some of the volume decrease. The recommendation here was let's reduce the prices. So it's still going to be higher margin than the commodity product, just not as high as we had expected or hoped. We actually added some sales incentives to the sales team to sell the higher margin products. We also actually shifted some resources from some of the items, some of the effort that was here on these item 4, and that shows all red. We took some of the resources that were selling just that item in particular and moved them to some of the other higher margin products. We had a resource shift. The big thing is that it actually reinforced the fact that the company needs to strategically look at getting out of the high volume game and finding a better way to produce lower volume products and not play the commodity game. So again, the question here now, what do you do about it? What do you do when you conduct this review and you realize they're not on track and it's an impact on volume or pricing? What do you do? And what turns into is I'll go back to that, the goal setting. So you have the goals and strategies and action items, and what you've now realized is that some of these actions and maybe a strategy aren't working. Let's reallocate resources. What's the decision? Something's not working. something else may be working better. Let's reallocate the resources and maybe kill a strategy or an action. And now you've made a decision, and now you're going to improve the performance of your business because you've made a change. And this, again, is back to keys.
Yeah, and sometimes those resources are not just people. Sometimes they're equipment, sometimes they're financial resources, sometimes they're marketing dollars or advertising dollars. But that whole notion of reallocation is critically important so that you keep investing on what's working and it's where you can really make a difference.
Exactly.
Chris, this is Richard. Can you flip back to the previous slide real quickly? Because I just want to reemphasize the point that you've been making, which is the focus, in my mind, the focus of these review sessions needs to be a discussion around options, your third bullet point. That's where you want your time and the attention and the resources that you've dedicated to the meeting focused is really coming up with options. And that's why all that preparation, information sharing is so critical so that people are informed, but it doesn't take the time, because I don't know anybody that's got more time in the day than they have things to do. And so really getting focused on that discussion on options to me is a critical key to making these meetings a success.
And now we're talking about strategy, and we're talking about how do you improve the business. So if you spend less time in a meeting, or let me rephrase it, if you get up to speed before the meeting with the summary sheet and you know what the performance is doing, and that sheet shows you some of the suggested options or recommendations, you can now spend the time in the meeting with your other team members strategizing on the options, and not, saying, well, wait, did you not sell because, and asking questions. We're now into more of what do we do about it, and that's the value of the strategic planning process and the value of that team. So exactly the case, Richard. Let me talk about meeting minutes. So we've conducted a review, and we just went through one objective. We now need to talk about the discipline piece, meeting minutes. Okay, we love doing meeting minutes, right? What are they really for? Well, I don't know how many times we've sat with clients, and they will bring up a decision that has been made to do something or not to do something, and then we ask them, well, what was the reasoning behind it? They go, I don't remember. I mean, something about these customers look good, or this product sounded good, or something like that. And I said, well, where's that key documentation of these strategic decisions that are made? And they go, you mean minutes? No, we don't take minutes. Nobody looks at minutes anyways because you just file them away, which is usually what happens. Well, if you had the minutes, they will capture that important decisions or assumptions that were made. And it talks about what are the action items and the commitments we have. So what you'll see here is a little sample of a brief abbreviated session, okay, a little summary. The company is on track overall, but selected strategies are not working. And here's the action items that have to be done, oh, by the way, by August 13th. So Mary's going to obtain some forecasts on the high-margin products because we've had an issue there. She's going to reforecast those sales in pounds and dollars. Peter's going to, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got a section of each strategy. So you'll see the increased sales of high-margin products that Mary was leading. It's a little behind. And you'll see a little summary of the volume and the customers, and this one may drop it, and will not meet July and August goals due to a customer shutdown. There's that summary, 5-6 bullets, that summarizes the whole page of information that Mary may have created on this product. And now you have that. And now when you go to August, you pull out this piece of paper and say, here's the action. In fact, what we do with our clients, and one of the things the clients like with us, is that we actually, necessarily take the minutes, but sometimes we take them, sometimes we direct them. But 2 weeks before the meeting, we send the meeting minutes out. We highlight the action items, and we do a lot of follow-up to help the president, owner, CEO make sure things are done. So now, let's look at pulling this all together. What is necessary to have a great review? Okay, we're starting to get into the wrap-up here. So if you have questions about anything we've gone through, now might be the time to open up that window and throw some questions in. This here is a list of many of the things we went through today that you can use to check to see are you doing a good job with your review process. Do you have the assumptions all the way down to discipline follow-through? Now, this is going to open up the second poll that I'm going to ask, which is this. The greatest challenge I have in improving my strategy review process is this. So take a second or two and respond to one of these. So the challenge you have with your review process is what? I don't know where to start, which would be the top one. Or we get into I know where to start but don't have either the time, I don't have the skills, I know where to start and I know what to do. Or if you're fortunate enough, I think that top 13%, you don't have any challenges with your review process at all. So take a 10, 15 seconds here and respond to this. Just about everybody's completed it. So let's see. Wait till you see the answer on this one. Nancy and Richard, we should have taken bets on this one.
Okay.
I think we probably would have all had the same thing. Actually, it's 100% saved. Here we go. So let's share with you the results. Okay, there's probably no surprise that most people don't know. They know where to start, but I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Now,
that's not a surprise at all.
Not a surprise at all. We probably all picked that.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is 0% said they don't have any challenges. So at least they're being honest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we put up similar polls like this that ask about, is it a matter of time, is it a matter of skill? And as you, the listener, probably know, although we use the word time, I changed that word and I call it a priority. We all have the same amount of time in the day. The question is, what's the priority? So I might ask you or challenge you to say it's not about time, it's a matter of you got other priorities that are going on in the business. And that's, I don't say it's acceptable, but at least it's more of a truth. I don't have time to, well, I'm not setting the priority that this is important. Okay? There is a bunch, equal amount, that don't have the skills, which is great. So those that don't have the skills, think about specifically what is it that you need. Okay, is it the documentation to the review? Is it a facilitator? Is it just someone to challenge it, to schedule it? Is it an administrator? What is it? And then get that resource to either in-house or out-house to get it done. Okay. So again, take charge of this rather than just letting it labor. So let me jump now to a wrap-up. What I'm going to do is go to this. So summarize, if you're going to have a great half-year review, first you need to define what your assumptions are. That is a huge factor to determine what your expectations are in having a successful review. From there, you can put your goals, your action items, your metrics, and make sure you get some owners that think people are going to get things done. And then to make good decisions, you need to know why your performance is different than assumed. Okay? Then you need to make a decision and keep on track. That's the discipline piece. So the question that we'll leave with you today, we've got maybe a minute, is what are you going to do about improving your performance? I'm going to look at questions as we're doing this and see, what are you going to do about it is kind of one of the themes that Growth Strategy Partners has. Now that you know what needs to be done, you can actually go back to this list here, and then you can look at it, and decide, I just lost my window here, and you can decide how you're going to make this better. And I'm going to have to go find, here we go. So I want to pull up my questions. I've got a couple questions. Let me address one of these at least right now. And it talks about how often you should you conduct a review. It's a simple one. This really is based on the business cycle. If there's a business cycle that maybe has a long sales cycle, Some of the construction industries that we've worked with have 1 year to 18-month sales cycles. Well, you sure as heck you may not need one every month. So first of all, the sales cycle should drive it. Anybody new, we suggest that you start doing it on a monthly basis to get in the rhythm, and then to jump to maybe every other month. And if your business cycle allows it, go to every quarter. Okay. We've got a couple more questions here. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to wrap it up here for those that do need to leave for a 2 o'clock Eastern time meeting. But I will answer some questions here in a second. The real question, what we want to share with you today is, what are you going to do to improve your performance? We've hopefully shared with you what you need to do to conduct a good review. Let's keep in mind we're trying to make our business better. The year is half over. We've got another 6 months to do, at least on the fiscal calendar. What are you going to do to make your business better? And either you're going to improve your process, you can do it yourself, or you got to go find some help to do it. Where Growth Strategy Partners is brought in is where the client, the owner, realizes there's some skills or time they don't have, and they ask us to facilitate that. And what they get is they get it done better, and they get it done faster and more efficiently, which goes back to kind of what our value proposition is. Okay? So I'd encourage you to take some action on this and make your business more successful. We will be sending out the presentation, the PowerPoint, the copy of this, later today or tomorrow. And I'm going to leave it here, and then I'm going to answer 1 or 2 more questions. But if those want to leave.
Did you want to say something about the recording?
We did record this, and that will be actually up on our website probably next week sometime. The Growth Strategy Partners under the resources, there's a resource section, so all these are recorded. So if there's somebody in your team that did not get a chance to listen in, or you want to go take down some good notes, you can do that also. So let me do that. In fact, I think with time, what I'm going to probably do is answer these questions directly than doing it here verbally. I'll probably send an email to those that have answered those questions. I thank you very much for your time, and look forward to future webcasts by Growth Strategy Partners. We'll probably have 1 or 2 more before the year's out.
Great.
Nancy,
Thanks,
Richard,
everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.